Do you struggle to find the right composition for your photos? Do your photos look like this or this? And you wish they would look more like this or perhaps this? Why other people's images look so much better than yours? If these questions have been living rent-free in your head, in today's video I'm gonna share with you my inexpensive tips to step up your photography game and start thinking about photography like a real pro. I'm gonna make you a bold promise here. I can guarantee you that without buying any new piece of equipment, you can transform your photos and nail your composition every single time if you follow my advices. I indeed believe that 90% of the improvements in a photo can be done without spending a single dime. Hey everybody, welcome back. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm super excited about this topic. I'm gonna skip over the most common tips to get a nice composition, like the rule of thirds. Because, well, most likely you have already heard about it, and if you didn't, well, YouTube has an ocean of videos about that topic. I want this video to become your Swiss Army knife, something that you can come back to when it comes to composition. Getting your composition right requires tons of practice, and sometimes you have to refresh your memory over and over about what you should be looking for when you are out on location. So, let's get to it and start with tip number 1. Don't get too close to your subject. I know, this sounds counterintuitive, because the closer you get, the more details you can capture, but when the framing is too tight around the subject, you are smothering the most important part of your composition. Look at this photo. The subject can't really breathe, and that can provoke discomfort in who's watching this image. Now, unless that's the feeling you wanted to arouse in the viewer, I would generally leave a fair amount of space around your subject. Something more along these lines. Some people might argue that there is too much headroom in this photo, but I actually think that in this case it works due to the fact that a bird can take off at any minute, and this particular framing would allow for that to happen. Different subjects require different compositions. Now, besides that, I think we can all agree that this is a more pleasant image to look at. By widening the cage in which your subject is, you are not only making it more at ease, but you are also able to display a bit more about the environment in which your subject lives. What's the point of going into the Amazon for a photo shoot if the same photo could have been taken in your balcony with your plants as background, since you're not actually showing any of the surroundings? Keep in mind that the environment can help you tell a better story and not that detail that helps the viewer to engage with your photographs. Moving on with tip number 2. A natural follow-up of the first tip is to include negative space in your composition. Negative space is defined as that empty portion of the frame that is surrounding the subject. It not only draws the attention towards the subject because, well, the rest of the frame is empty and boring, but it can also give the impression that our subject is lonely and insecure. When negative space is used purposefully, it can create amazingly powerful images. Sometimes we try to overcomplicate our compositions and include way too many elements. By removing everything that's not necessary and that clutters the image, we actually give clearer indication to the viewer about what they should focus on and what's the message behind our image. Leading lines. As the name says, those are natural elements that act as arrows that point towards the subject of the frame, leading the viewer eye to explore the image the way you intended. Anything can be a leading line. Sometimes you just need to be a bit patient, like in this photo. Okay, that was clearly staged, but seriously though, boats, trees, patches of snow, roads, walls. Everything that is pointing towards your subject can be used to keep the focus within the frame. Leading lines are easier to exploit when you use a wide-angle lens. Due to their perspective distortion, if you position yourself in the right place, straight lines will converge to the vanishing point of your frame. If the subject is close to that point, you have effectively used leading lines to your advantage. Use wide-angle lenses to play with the size of the elements in the frame. Take particular attention to your foreground. Whatever is in front of your lens is going to look much bigger than it actually is. Use that to rewrite the hierarchy of the elements in your frame. By the way, if you are enjoying this video, may I ask you to like and subscribe so that I know you want to see more of this type of content. Many thanks to everyone who's already supporting this channel. I do appreciate every single one of you. Now let's get back to our video. Use longer lenses to compress the scene. Sometimes you want further away things to look bigger and closer. That's when you want to use a telelens. Get a closer look to these very far away details of your scene, isolate the subject from all the craziness around it, and if your subject is too big and it doesn't fit in the frame, remember that you can always stitch multiple photos together to get a wider view of the same perspective. This of course only applies with non-moving subjects, but you got the idea. Avoid tangents and busy backgrounds at all costs. As you would naturally avoid having something like a leaf or a branch between your camera and the subject, try to also keep an eye on what's behind it. A branch crossing someone's head is as distracting as if it was in front of them. I've already mentioned this point in my previous video, but it's indeed a very critical idea to just spend time walking around your subject. A different angle or perspective can not only result in a cleaner background, but also make your photos unique and interesting. Raise or lower your point of view. Human eye level is usually very boring. Everybody sees the world that way, try to give them a new way of looking at a familiar object or subject. What's the point of looking at something that I've already seen? There is a reason why drone photography has become so popular. People just wanted to see something new. Well, drone photos don't really look that new anymore, but it's still a good idea to look for new point of view. Position your subject against the brightest area of your frame. The human eye is drawn to look at the brightest part of your photos first. So, either make your subject the brightest element or place it in front of the brightest area. Silhouettes are a clear example of this principle application. By doing that, you are clearly defining what is the interesting part of your photo and where we should look first. If you think about it, vignetting is actually aiming to do that exactly, darkening the edges of the frame to make us focus at the center where the relevant part of our photo actually is. You know why sunset photos are so pleasing to the eye? Well, they are an essential application of this principle. It is a dark scene with a single clear, very bright subject. Create balance in your image. In photography, we are often encouraged to not put our subject in the middle of the frame. Offsetting the point of interest usually makes it for a better composition, and although there is a time and place for perfectly centered subjects, unbalancing the frame usually makes it for a more interesting photo. Careful though to not fall in the trap of having one side of the image that is too heavy compared to the other side. When looking at your image, if it appears to be crooked, even when it is actually perfectly leveled, you might be looking at a photograph that is too much out of balance. In this case, you can look for a different perspective to balance the visual weight. Or perhaps you can use an auxiliary object like a boulder close to the house, or any other visual trick really to re-establish perfect balance. Frame your subject. Enclosing something into a frame can quickly establish what is the main focus of the photograph. Look for things that naturally isolate your subject from the rest of the scene. A frame within a frame can restrict the area to look at, it can help the viewer to not feel overwhelmed by the complexity of the scene, and scan the elements of the pictures in the way you have intended. Street photographers are usually very good at that, due to the fact that they have to deal with unpredictable moments in busy environments. But they are not the only ones who can take advantage of this technique. As I said, there are natural frames everywhere, you just need to look for it. Exploit symmetries. When you recognize something with symmetry, try to look for an angle where that symmetry works at its best. I earlier said that central composition can be actually very powerful sometimes. Well, this is one of those times. Don't fight the symmetry by putting the mirror plane off to one side. Put it right in the middle and exclude everything that might break the mirroring pattern to achieve a more balanced and pleasing photograph. Use reflections. Lakes, ponds, shiny metal stuff are all things that can create symmetries where there are none. Recognize patterns. Great photographers are capable of spotting patterns in everything they look at. Patterns can be indeed an interesting subject on their own, but they can also be a powerful compositional element. If you can find something that breaks that pattern and make that your subject, you can achieve clear isolation of it due to the pattern that surrounds it. A sudden break in a pattern is something that immediately catches our attention and therefore a perfect subject for a photo. Look at this image from Gianmarco Meroni, where this idea has been exploited at its best. Crisscross multiple elements. Just recently, an Italian photographer has created an amazing photo by applying this concept. The idea here is to create something visually interesting by aligning multiple elements on different levels. If we look at this photo, it is quite clear that The overlapping of all these simple shapes is creating something new, a composition that has never been seen before. The photographer here waited 6 years for all these elements to align, but it can be done in simpler ways with any subject, like I did in this photo. Edge patrolling. When we take photographs, we are so focused on our subject that it's easy to forget how the edges of the frame look. What will make you a better photographer is the attention to the details. The edges of your frame are as important as your subject. Always scan the entire frame and decide what to include and what to exclude. Avoid things halfway in. They can be quite distracting and lead the viewer eye out of the frame, wondering what you have cut out. Either in or out. No halfway measures here. Define the scale of your image. Use human relatable objects or subjects to give the viewer a sense of scale. Sometimes isolated subjects are not relatable because we don't have the tools to know what they are. Are we looking to a miniature or to a full-scale shipwreck? If we don't give the viewer any anchoring element, there is no way for them to understand what they're looking at. And that can cause disengagement with your photo. A person close to the subject can be used to give scale information to better understand and engage with the image. Alright everybody, that was a long video, but I hope you found it interesting. I would be super happy if you can comment down below with your tips to follow when it comes to composition. Let's share with one another and we will all be better off. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao!